Well, good evening. It is about 1 a.m. So good morning. Yes, I did get a haircut and a bit of food. My bad. Just had some good friends over for a very civilized dinner. No hanky panky, no funny business, no baby oil. Showing 1,000 bottles of it. thousand bottles. It's not even like those small, like half a liter bottles. It's like a 5 liter one bottle, like 1,000 of them. Anyway, welcome to the Art of Mixing, Season 2 breakdown. We are at the season finale. Okay, so I just want to say one thing, and it got me thinking. When we have friends over and we do things, obviously, and socialize and all that. It got me thinking how just time, it just keeps on ticking away. Like you do all this stuff and just time just does not care. It just and yeah, I just sometimes think when you're having a great time with friends, you sort of never want it to end, but everything just has a sort of beginning and end. My dad likes to say that all the time. Everything has its beginning and end, and it's true. It's confronting, yeah, but it puts things into perspective. Like no matter how sad or happy or whatever you might be, all different things rolled into one. It just time just does not care. It just keeps on ticking away, and yeah, I don't know. I guess you can look at life from a pessimistic, sort of pissed off view at everything, and life doesn't care. It just keeps on ticking away. Yeah. I think it was Tony Robbins that said, it's something that stuck with me. I can't, I know, yes, but we went from baby oil to this, but bear with me. Bear with me. I'm not coming back to the baby oil. That's in the past. It's not. I think Tony Robbins said, focus. Very serious right now. What I wanted to say quickly was that, our years are just gonna go by, right? And 5 years from now, it's gonna happen either way. It's gonna happen either if you like it or not. And it's important that you do something useful in that time. It's gonna pass by whether you like it or not. So you might as well do something within that time. And I guess it just puts things into perspective. Like if you have a course or something you want to do, and you're like, oh man, it's gonna take me 3 years, right? It's gonna pass by anyway. It's not like it's magically not going to come. It's gonna happen either way. So I mean, you can either think long term and prepare yourself for 3 years to be in a better position, or you can go for the short term and sort of be in the same place in 3 years. Because 3 years, 5 years it's gonna come. So just time just keeps on ticking away. And just I don't know. It's just something I was just thinking about when I was just saying bye to everyone, and I was like, you know what, I feel like finishing off this season in this sort of contemplative sort of state. But yeah, it's a bit sort of, I guess because because I'm so wrapped up in everything that I do, having all those things. So I really cherish the moments when I can have people over and just chill. And also like people are super busy now. Like, but I think we're busier than ever been before. I guess everyone has so many things happening, and it's getting more and more difficult. I find just organizing things. Everyone's busy on weird days, and every time you organize something, somehow everything sort of pops up in the exact same time. Like everyone's busy in the exact same time, and then you have like gaps of like nothing, and then like everyone does the exact same thing on the same day. It's so weird. Anyway, food for thought. Let's get into this breakdown. Let's get into the art of mixing. Welcome to the art of mixing. If you're just joining in, I like to shoot the shit, as they say, in the beginning, and just have a bit of fun. Just chat, catch up, and so you know what's happening in the world of Valarijex. That being said, let's let's roll the intro and let's get cracking. That was a good slide. That was a good slide. Come on, that was a good one. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Let's get started.
It's not an easy thing to, switch off the tempo, right? So there are many things that when we are starting out in the world of mixing, in the world of DG mixing, there are many shortcuts that we can take, right? And one of these is this sync function, right? And during the sort of progressive house days, 2009, 10, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, 13, pushing 14, right? A lot of the music was at 128 BPM, 125, 126. So I would say 125 to 130, okay? And it was very easy just to press sync and it syncs to the next one and you just go from one song to the next one song to the next one song to the next, okay? And in fairness, right, there is only so much you can do with that genre mixing wise because there's a lot of information, and there's very little space to really mix in anything else. Okay, good example of this is Calvin Harris, for example, right? So and people say etc. Right? One of the aspects there, first off, is that he's the one that created music and he can play it the way he chooses to play. Secondly, not everyone is designed to be the sort of headlining act at a festival, for example. It depends what type of festival it is. For unfortunately, most festivals go super hard, and unnecessarily hard, to the point where it's not even musical. It's just hard for the sake of hard. When you're dealing with, for example, slightly much more heavier melodic, like so, Calvin Harris is very heavy melodically, right? So it's what made his music very popular. It still makes his music very popular because it's heavy on the melodic side. It's very catchy and it's feels good music. And like One Kiss is an awesome song. It's an awesome song. Like it's not a festival banger song, but it's an awesome song, okay? But when you're playing that in a context of a mix, right, there's only so much you can do with that song. So you play that song, right? He plays that song. There's only so much you can do with it because there's a lot of information in that song. You really need to extract the vocal from that song to really do anything with it, from my perspective at least. So going from that song to another song is really all you can do in that scenario. When you're playing, you would really need to play an alternative version of that song or an extended mix version of that song to really be able to do anything with it, right? So what do I mean by music information, right? So we've touched on this briefly, right? So tech music is very minimalistic, right? And that's what makes it very good to mix with, and you can manipulate it and you can add things in and out, right? But it's very minimal in its nature, so it doesn't have too much music information. So it doesn't have roaring vocals and harmonies, and it doesn't have all at once. It might have the bass and the kick and snare. It might have the bass with the kick and the vocal. There might be certain moments where you have the kick and snare, the hi-hats, the vocal, but then sort of things are coming in, things are coming out. In pop music, for example, in the line, for example, that Calvin Harris, that sort of mainstream EDM, for lack of a better term. By the way, this isn't me shitting on Calvin Harris. I actually like Calvin Harris. I like his music. It's been quite influential on the EDM scene. Yeah, we're just looking at the characteristics of music, right? And we're just breaking down, the understanding of what I'm getting to basically is we put a lot of shit onto the way things are mixed, right? But what we have to understand is that there's only so much we can do with certain types of music, right? And progressive house music, mainstream, EDM, pop music, it's very condensed. Okay, there's so much information, and at any one time you'll have multiple elements going. You'll have the vocals, the bass, the kick, and the snares, and the hi-hats, and the effects, and the synths, and the guitars, and piano, and you'll have a lot of different stuff happening all the time, right? And there's only so much you can do with it. A great example of this is Siesta Sundays, right? The limited series that I create. There's only so much I can do mixing wise because there's a lot of information. The tempo of the song is very important because you can't fast mix between songs when it's a lower tempo. If the mix is chill and you're it's not gonna work. Yeah, so that just brings me to the point, where one aspect is that yes, definitely we can, do these sort of live mashups, or you can, build and create verse of one and blend it with the chorus of another, for example. So that's something you can do. You can play the second chorus, play the ending of the song, and blend it with another song. You can create, add effects in certain places and blend it together. These are some things I try in Siesta Sundays. But you'll notice that it is a bit limiting in terms of what I can really do. But you'll notice in like Cyberpunk is where I really unleash and I just, let loose and just have fun with it because it's a lot more forgiving in what I can do. And you notice in Rave Till I Die, it's a bit of a blend between two, right? Sometimes some songs I can get away with certain things, and other ones I can't really get away with it. So it's a blend of different things. And when you're working with progressive house, for example, between that sort of time frame, right? There's only so much you can do with the music, right? And this is where that sort of, approach of creating sort of live little edits and stuff like that. And I've been sort of trying to figure out why it was such a craze. I'm not a fan of it. And what I've come to find is I think it's because of that. Because there's only so much you can do, right? Mixing wise with that kind of music, right? So approaching it from a sort of computer perspective and creating a sort of edits on the computer and then putting it onto one and then playing it, right? When you're doing it like that, it's cool, right? But there's only so much you can do from a mixing perspective. And people take advantage of that, and some people unfortunately just press played and the full set. There you go. Because yeah, you can't you're just going from one song to the next. You create a playlist basically. Yeah, and it's tough now looking at from the perspective now, but looking at from back then when I would party and stuff, I didn't really notice it that much. Back then I was up there just to have a great time, right? And now I'm a lot more educated, right? And when we watch films and stuff like that, it's almost like when you watch like old 80s films, right? And like, how the hell they get away with this? Same principle, right? You watch like, an old Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, right? And it's just like so cool and stuff like that. It grabs like, the rocket launcher. And that kind of movie isn't made today. Like, there's certain things you can get away with back then. You just can't do that now. I mean, look at the length that John Wick has to go to and the authenticity that has to be there just to create an action movie, or like the Mission Impossible stuff. So the barrier, the level of sort of scrutiny for action movies is very, very high. And I think that's sort of the perspective, because now in sort of the internet age, things move at a much quicker pace, right? So back 10 years ago, we're sort of in that 80s phase, right? And now we're sort of a lot more educated about that whole scene. We understand it. And there's certain things now you can't really get away with anymore. And one of them is that you can't just stand there and play the song. So you have to be creative in mixing a variety of different styles into the piece. It's my perspective that you can't really, it's almost like when you're creating music, you really have to be the one that's creating music. There is no excuse anymore. Back when Elvis is recording and stuff like that, he couldn't do everything on his own. It just wasn't possible. With the advent of technology and everything, we had Prince and other characters who were able to do all the recordings and everything on their own. So with the times, things change, and a higher standard is then applied to do that. So with that same token, a higher standard needs to be applied to the authenticity, to really screening where our music comes from, just like we screen, where our chocolate and stuff comes from. We need to develop a higher, clarity of, who's behind this song, why is this, 40 people, that created this song? Like, is this a band, or is this the artist, or is this the performer? Like, what's going on here? So I think those things are really important. I hope that, through the years as we go forward, more and more information comes out, more people become more educated about, what they listen to on the radio, what, where's that music coming from, what's going on behind the scenes. So that's like a super long version, but yeah, I just wanted to share sort of that with you, and you have to, come from the perspective of, there's only, in that scenario, there's only so much that we can do with certain styles of music, right? And the way to combat that is you have to do a variety of different styles to really create an experience, right? Otherwise, you're just being the entertainer, okay? And I don't think you can just get away with it anymore. I think it's had its time, okay? Yeah. It's like a super long explanation of sync and stuff like that. So this is why I think that it's really key to, take off that sync, right? So when we are starting off, as I know, like we're in like a huge rant and ramble there, but when we are starting off, there are certain things that we look at, like the sync, and like, it's easier for me, there's a press sync. And yes, it is, yes, but we've come to a point where you really need to increase your level as a DJ, and you can't just, sync. It's just, you can't do that anymore. That time period you could get away with that, it's over, right? And really we should just take it out of circulation in the decks. And it is a pain, manually adjusting the tempo and getting used to it. It is. It's a pain in the butt. It really is. It's a pain. But the more you do it, it just becomes second nature, right? And it's better just to peel the Band-Aid off and just do it straight away. And the point I'm getting to after that, 10-minute ramble,
Let's get started.
is you can do that, okay? And you can't do that if you don't allow things to be free, right? You can't add that human touch, right? Things are so syncopated now with that, synchronization you can have on Ableton, etc. You need to have that human feel. That's what made funk music, disco music. That's what makes it so good, because it has that human feel to it. And we try and replicate that now to create the vibe of the 80s and stuff like that. You need to have that human feel in it. That's what makes the Daft Punk stuff so good. The Random Access Memories, it has a human touch. You can feel it. It's something that's just beyond our conscious level. It's something subconsciously, you just feel it. And with especially in the post dubstep and the heavy electronic music, it can be very syncopated, can be very synthetic, right? And turning off the master tempo and allowing us to be free in terms of our pitching and really adjusting the vinyl tones and stuff like that, that gives us a level of authenticity, and it gives us that human touch. It creates that connection that sometimes can lack in electronic music. Not always, but sometimes it can feel a bit too mechanical. Cool. So yeah, that's just what I want to share with you, that clip, is that be brave in turning off the sync function, allowing yourself to manually adjust. Okay? And then through that, you're able to have a little more flexibility, adjusting the tone of the song.
Go.
Okay, so you notice how we're doing it musically, right? I've banged on this term like so many times, musically. You need to do it with the music. You can't just, you and you're allowing that sort of build and tail, ha, ha, okay? And then as the song's building, you add it more and more and more and more. And you're first and foremost, you're working with your timing, right? So you're developing your skill to go with the music. You're not just timing it, but you're grooving with the music, and then you're applying it musically with the piece.
When a person is tone deaf, that is to say,
We've looked at many different transitions, right? And one of the more sort of complex, transitions, or advanced transitions, however you want to look at it, a transition that's at a higher level is using the tail of an effect to join the two. So this way, in this situation, we're not using the music. Okay, we're not using music. We're not using the pieces of music, right? 100%. So in most transitions, we use one song, create another one, and we create a bit of a tail, and that joins the next one, okay? In this situation, we are creating essentially a pause through the reverb tail, and we are creating a transition through the effect, right? Now, in this situation, if we just have a pause, it won't work as well, right? Because I think the pause would just be too long. It doesn't really work. It'd just be nothing. Just be, that's it. So we capture the ending of the song with the effect, and we continue that effect. We continue the tail, and we use that to bridge that pause, to bridge that gap, and we bring in the next song. Okay. So let's watch it one more time.
when a person is tone deaf, that is to say, he cannot hear melody.
We add the vinyl break, we add the effect in, okay? And now the song has stopped, right? But we're extending it out, okay? And for me, it creates tension, it creates anticipation, it creates a lust for the unknown, like what is going on right now, right? So you're sort of, leaving it, right? But we sort of like grab that sort of lasso, and we're like, yeah, come back, and we'll bring it back in, yeah?
When a person is tone deaf,
It makes sense, right? A great place to use this is when you have a moment that is opposing itself, right? So you have, a very heavy sort of style, a chorus, with those dubstep elements, etc. And then now you're sort of going into a very sort of cinematic sort of, Alan Watts is talking. If we just switched over to this straight away, it would be like, what the fuck? First off, it'll be completely off, the groove of everything, right? It'll make no sense. It'll just be so random, right? But this way, when we create that tail effect, right? We then extend it out, and we essentially allowing the groove to stop, okay? We slowly allow everyone, so everyone sort of, and then, right? And instead of having just a pause, and then nothing, and then just goes into like this sort of Alan Watts talk, we have this sort of reverb that comes in, right? And we create that extension out. We allow everyone to just, slowly chill. and we bring in, this next sort of ending sort of, scene that we've transitioned into.
That is to say, he cannot hear melodies. He only hears noise, and he can't understand why other people find music attractive. What is his deficiency? Where is he blind? His blindness is that he cannot hear relationships. Or rather, in musical language, he doesn't hear intervals.
Why are you adding the crush here? Okay, what's the thought process? Well, the thought process is that I find that the vocal is a bit already distorted. It has, the song has a bit of that sort of, it might not be the best recording. It sounds a bit, compressed. There's a bit of that big crush in there. And I'm just sort of, doubling down on that. And, I've mentioned that previously that, if there was like some sort of AI, collaboration where you could section out the stems of the piece and you can really manipulate a certain, stem of that song, that would be really cool. And then, in this situation, I will really, apply the crush effect to that vocal only. In this situation, I apply it to the whole thing. I apply it to just everything. Everything gets soaked in. Now, in most cases, the loudest component will be the most affected, right? So in this case, the vocal is the loudest component. In most cases, the vocal is the loudest thing in the song. And that's usually the first thing that'll get, manipulated first. First thing to get manipulated first.
If you are musically sensitive, what you hear in the melody is not a string of notes. You hear the steps.
You notice how we're playing with the lyrics of the song, right? So we're creating that, again, that sort of different perspective on the piece. We're adding that dimensionality to it. And as, the levels, you'll notice the different levels, blah, blah, blah. You can apply the sort of crush, and that sort of, as it sort of levels, you're moving back, and it's sort of, it's creating that effect where it's sort of, going back in tune, right? And you're sort of playing with that vocal lines. Let's watch it one more time.
You hear the steps. You recognize the major scale of C.
It's very subtle, right? But as it's sort of building back up, and it's coming back to where we wanted, we add that effect in, and it just helps accentuate that moment. It helps draw your attention to it.
As ascending. Why do we think of that as higher? What does it mean that one sound is higher than another? That's nonsense to a person who's tone deaf.
So again, you're adding in this human element, right? So as it's going on, right, we add in some effects, we're checking the next song and bringing the next song, we're doing our thing, right? But then, we find moments we can add a bit of, insecurity into that mix, right? Imagine if you're a violinist, or you're a cello player, or you're a guitarist. You don't just stand there, then just play the violin, No one does that, Or at least, the great musicians don't do that. They sway with it. If you're a violinist, if they're a little bit nervous, they might, a certain note might be a little sharp, They accentuate certain notes, They're one with the music, okay? In a way, how do we approach that in the electronic space when we're performing in this type of way? And one example is through this, we can manipulate the pitch, we can manipulate the tone through manipulating the turntable, right? We can create our own texture, create a bit of that playfulness, that sensitivity in the mix and distance ourselves a little bit from the very sort of syncopated electronic sphere that we're in. So one thing I'll say is listen to the percussive elements here. There's a lot of things coming in and coming out.
Got mail.
We're looking at now adding an effect musically with the piece. Okay, so why would you do something like this? Well, it's when you want to create your sort of your own moment in that song to draw attention, okay, to you performing. Okay, so I noticed the song is going, right? It's awesome, really cool song, heavy and bombastic. I love it. And now I'm thinking, oh, I got an idea. Let's add something cool. But you see that we're doing it, we're working with that timing, right? So we press the play button, we create that vinyl break, and then we give it that sort of, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're working with the tempo of the song. We're not just like 1, 2. 1, 2, bam, da, da, okay? So playing along with it, and I'm wanting to see if I can join back onto when the sweep comes in. So we create this moment, we create that unique moment in that song, and then we bring it back in and we move on. There you go. So we press play, stop, we turn around, we attach it back to that sort of sweep up and effect, comes back in, then the You Got Mail, and then we're moving on.
Mail.
Apologies, I was just in the volume. We know that harmonically they're in the same sort of space, right? And one way we can create familiarity with and joining it to the next section is by adding in one of the vocal shots for the song that we want to come in. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, one of the reasons could be in this situation that I'm not 100% sure if it's gonna work, right? That blend, because this song is pretty intense, and then this one's I know that harmonically they're in the same sort of ballpark, but I don't want all the information to clash, because I can't remember, if the song has something at the end of it or not. Are they going to blend well together? I'm not 100% sure, right? And one of the ways we can sort of distance ourselves from what's happening 100% from that transition, that blend, is by playing that song, that cue point a little bit earlier, right? And let me clarify, right? So your favorite TV show that comes and it's a new season, right? And you press play and you watch it, right? Okay. I don't know why I explained that. But anyway, when we watch a new season, right? We're watching that frame, and when we press play, every moment is new for us, right? It's invigorating, it's exciting, because you don't know what's gonna happen, right? And we pay close attention to the main protagonists, the main events, right? But when we watch it for the second time, we don't really pay attention to the main sort of components, but we start looking at other things that are happening, right? Because we know what's happening, we're looking for other things. We might pick up, that the clock is at the wrong time or something like that, or there's a coffee cup where it shouldn't be, or something like that, right? We notice other things rather than just the main sort of storyline, okay? So in the same notion, because I know that it's not 100% gonna work well, with it. It might work, might not, right? I'm not sure. We can create a bit of familiarity beforehand. So then when it does come in, people aren't 100% focused on that vocal line because they've already heard it once, right? And subconsciously, you'll be focused on other things, right? So one of the things that I would like the focus to be on is the effects, the reverbs, the things I add around it to blend them two together. Okay, so in this instance, from a practical standpoint, we are adding the fader in, right? We're holding down the cue point. We're syncing it up onto the grid, right? So they're coming in, and I'm attaching it onto the tail of the piece, right? So as it sweeps in, we cut in the vocal line, and then we sweep it back into the song, okay? And we're holding down the cue point for this moment, because I know that once I release it, the song will stop. And that cue point will stop. If I press play, it's just gonna, you have to move the fader down, right? Right? And we pull the fader down, we press the cue point, the vocal snippet comes in, and then we switch back, right? And we've created that familiar context, and we can continue forward. So we create the notion that something's about to happen. Again, I'm a bit paranoid, right? So I'm adding in the cue point, but now I'm adding in effects just to create a bit of separation, right? So you notice that we're not focused so much on that new song because we played it already once, right? So I'm adding in effects to create that separation, create that distance so people focused on the effects. Okay, but thankfully it all worked out well. The song was blended in nicely. And then we have the effect, and all it does is complement the transition, and you have that beautiful tail out, and it just blends everything well together. I think for me, the main worry was that when I cut the fader out, it might have a bit of leakage, might have a bit of unwanted information there. So adding in this heavier effect and presenting a bit earlier then allowed me to create that bit of separation, bring it down, allow the effect to take over, and I hope that the focus is that beautiful reverb tail comes down. Cool. Okay, almost at the finishing line. The pitch effect is a very powerful effect, right? But you just have to be careful with it because it can be overused very, very quickly. Okay. And in this instant, we're just using it for that vocal snippet. I'm not gonna say that here, but you get the idea. So we're adding a bit of that human touch to things, okay? And again, it's just creating a bit of commonality, right? It's allowing things to be a little more human, and it's allowing things to have less syncopated nature. Well, we've mentioned already, but you get the idea, right? So we're able to add that effect in, and make it feel like that you're performing the song rather than just playing the song. That's beautiful. Well, that's what I wanted to get to. Hallelujah. Yep. We want to perform the piece. We don't want to play the piece. Okay? Awesome. One of the ways that you can make things dirtier is by lowering the pitch of it. So if you turn the master tempo off, we can then significantly lower the growliness of things and make it even dirtier. And if you don't go too crazy with it, like we are here, you can maintain the master tempo. That will maintain obviously the tempo, so you won't go slower. But you can then obviously pitch it down because you're not in sync. When we have the master tempo on, we are able to lower the tempo of the piece, but we'll maintain the same pitch, right? But you can then extend certain moments out, and you can essentially, you can make them more prominent than they are, okay? More noticeable, right? When we turn the master tempo off, okay, this will allow us to change the pitch, okay, and we can create a darker tone underneath, but it will also adjust the tempo of what we're working with, okay? So you just have to bear that in mind. But if you do it musically, right, we can lower down the pitch and that create that different tone and texture, and then bring it back up to that sort of bass tempo for dubstep and post dubstep and that sort of space. 140, 155, yeah, BPM. That's sort of your ballpark, okay? Add more performance to this piece, right? We can really go crazy, almost like a race car, that's something you can apply to add that sort of unique texture and feature to things. Sometimes I'll play it at the same tempo, if it's like 150, 150, and then play and then go down to like 140, 145, and bring up to like 155 and bring it down. It just depends, how you're feeling, how you feel that the mix is progressing. We can have a permanent effect in, right? So we can allow the effects to be in all the time, and we can adjust the amounts that we want to add in and remove them, okay? So in most cases, I like adding little subtle little snippets of the effect, like in textures, and create my own, because it allows me to have my own manipulation of things. However, if you want just a broad, amount of effect, then that's what you can do. You can change that, and just a quick switch of the button down the bottom next to that channel, that strip of your effects here, your channel sort of strip. You can just press the button down below, and you can just, is there a word? On-off switch. The fancy word there, but it's on-off. So you can have it on or off, and you can just really crank it up if you want to have it all on all the time. And that's what we're doing here. Cool. Okay. Awesome. So there you go. You can notice there that right at the end we're adding in a big phaser flanger sort of vibe to things. Very cool. Very complementary to this style of music, and I don't see it used as much in this style, which is a shame. It complements it well. Complements and creates a less abrasive tone to things. But look, the style of music is in that realm. It's supposed to be in your face. That's why dubstep was pinged at -4 LUFS, and it was like super loud and distorted and just in your face. And it was a vibe. It's thing. It's just like FL Studio. It has a certain distortion when you're exporting. It has that sort of clip distortion that's characteristic to it. It has its own vibe. Yeah. Again, it's about working what you have, working with the software. It doesn't matter if it's FL Studio, Ableton, Pro Tools, etc. Logic. Work with what suits you the best. I started on FL Studio, didn't really work for me, and I moved to Ableton, and I fell in love with it. It's my home. I know how to do what I need to do on it, and I'm constantly learning, constantly improving, and learning new aspects on the software. It's a very powerful software. There's so many things to look at and to explore. But the thing is, having that understanding, having that foundation of how to use that product is very important. Just like, DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, and etc. I'm sure that, some features are better on one, some features are better on the other. But if you don't understand how to understand the fundamentals and how to, get the best out of that, doesn't matter what you use if you don't know how to get the best out of it. You have the best software in the world, but if you don't know how to use it, you don't know how it works, what settings are best for that one, that just takes time for that particular software. And the great thing is, once you learn the keys, fundamentals for a particular sort of DAW or instrument, they can apply very well to other aspects. And there might be some differences, but the core of it is the same. It's frustrating when you want to do something and you can do it very quickly in one software. I think that from a creative standpoint, that's very important to me. Is if I have when I have an idea, I want to be able to get it down as quick as possible. And if I have to fidget around with something that I don't know how to use, then it just adds more complications. It just and by the time you get around to solving anything, you just but yeah. So you want something that's that you know how to use, that you're very you know almost like the back of your hand, basically. That's very important. And then it's very easy to sort of push yourself to look behind and what else you can do. So I think that'll be the biggest takeaway here, is that look at what you have, then realize that time is going to pass anyway, right? So 5 years from now is going to pass, whether you like it or not. There's nothing we can do, right? No amount of baby oil is gonna help lubricate time ticking away. Not even 1,000 bottles. Okay? So, always looking it from a longer term perspective rather than a short term gain. Okay? And yes, short term, the sync is gonna work better, and you're badass at that moment because you can quickly mix songs, right? But it will hurt you in the long term. So yes, it's annoying to manually adjust it and figure that out in the beginning, but it's very, very important, and you'll thank yourself later in your career, and you'll be like, yes, that was a good idea. And then you have much more flexibility and much more room to breathe creatively. Yeah. It's the same with DAW. Don't pick the easiest one. Pick the one that works well with your frame of mind. Okay, and if you're one that just prefers Pro Tools, then work with that. And if it fits in your scope, the way you think, then work with that, and you'll pick it up. That's sort of just going a bit off tangent, but yeah, you sort of get where I'm going with this. Yeah, just be patient with things and allow things to develop. We've covered so much stuff in this new season, and I hope that you've been able to, from each episode, take one thing out of it that's going to help you upon your journey. Whether that's if you're creating music, or you're mixing, or in studio work, or just someone who enjoys just like we enjoy watching games. I hope that you can find just a little bit of something here that will help you upon your journey, and give you a different perspective on things. I wish I would have some very sort of profound thing to say at the end, but I'm just really looking forward to the next season, and looking at different aspects, and looking at the continuation of the journey here for the art of mixing. I've really enjoyed this season. One of the highlights for me was being open about sharing with you moments where there was a mistake, or there was a moment where a lapse of judgment, or whatever you want to call it. And I think those moments are key. I can very easily just cut it out and be like, yeah, they didn't allow me to use that song, right? But I'm comfortable with my level, the way I mix, the way I do things. I do it the way I want to do it. And in that scenario, in this type of mixing scenario, where I want things to be very authentic and genuine, just doing it in one go, those things are going to happen. And I'm okay with sharing them with you, because I think they're very important, because you can see where to improve on. And I know the next time I'll pay more attention to that. Obviously, I have a lot more practice than just a blanket sort of free for all. But either way, it doesn't matter. The key is to look at moments like those and be like, okay, cool. So this is what I was wanting to do, but this is what happened, right? And the key is to stay focused in moments like that, and to just continue forward. Don't make a facial expression. Don't just be like, everyone. Just maintain your focus, maintain your composure, and keep moving forward. Okay, because chances are most people will not see it that way. Everyone has their own perspective on things, and people might even like that moment. Okay, so I think that's been really cool for me to share with you guys in this season. And I hope that I've given you sort of a bit more behind the scenes of me as a person and what I love to do. And I'm looking forward to the brand new season. Enjoy these breakdown episodes, and I will do my best to do those sort of special sort of edition episodes of this sort of full structure mix. But just give me some time. Give me some time. Takes a minute to edit this and get the thumbnail ready and everything else. I am first and foremost an artist, a music creator. I just do this for the love that I have for mixing. So first and foremost, I am, my main focus is, music and creating music, and then everything else. But that being said, thank you so much for joining me on this season finale. And I hope you picked up something wonderful from this. Awesome. You are awesome. I love you all very, very much. Big hug, virtual big hug. And I shall catch you on the brand new season. Whenever that is. All right. I'll catch you on the other side. All right. See ya.